The stars shimmered like diamonds scattered across an endless black canvas. In the vast silence of space, humanity's most advanced fleet drifted quietly, its ships sleek and metallic, glinting faintly under the light of a distant sun. At the heart of this armada was the Invincible Tide, a colossal warship commanded by Admiral Cal Voss, a seasoned leader known for his calm demeanor and sharp instincts. Humanity had come far since leaving Earth, now called the Deathworld, due to its brutal ecosystems that forged humans into resilient survivors. But even with their progress, the universe remained full of mysteries. It was during one of these routine patrols near uncharted sectors of the galaxy when it happened. A sudden blip appeared on the ship's sensors, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't just random cosmic noise. It carried structure, rhythm, a deliberate pattern. The crew gathered around the communication console as Lieutenant Rhea Cade, the ship's xenobiologist, adjusted the frequencies. Her fingers danced over the controls, isolating the signal. "What is it?" asked Captain Taryn Drake, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity. She stood beside Admiral Voss, arms crossed, her sharp eyes scanning the readouts. "I'm not sure yet," replied Dr. Lyra Solon, the fleet's linguist. She leaned closer to the screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. After several tense moments, she spoke again. "It's a message, or at least part of one." Admiral Voss stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow over the console. "Can you translate it?" Dr. Solon hesitated before nodding slowly. "Some fragments are clear. It says, 'Help us.' And then there's something about danger, something coming." The bridge fell silent. Help, danger. These were words that resonated deeply with anyone who'd ever faced adversity, and every human aboard the Invincible Tide knew what it meant to fight for survival. Earth itself had taught them that lesson countless times. Captain Drake broke the silence. "Could be a trap," she said bluntly. "We don't know who, or what, sent this." Voss nodded thoughtfully. "True, but we also can't ignore it. If someone, or something, is truly in trouble, we have a responsibility to investigate." The decision weighed heavily on him. Engaging with unknown species always carried risks. History books were filled with tales of first contacts gone wrong, some ending in bloodshed. Yet humanity had thrived because of its willingness to take chances. Earth's harsh environment hadn't allowed fear to paralyze its people. Instead, it had made them adaptable, resourceful, and bold. "Set course for the source of the signal," Voss ordered finally. His voice carried authority, leaving no room for argument. The crew sprang into action, plotting coordinates and preparing the fleet for whatever lay ahead. As the Invincible Tide moved through the void, ominous readings began to appear on the scanners. Strange energy signatures pulsed faintly in the distance, unlike anything they'd encountered before. Lieutenant Cade frowned as she analyzed the data. "Sir, these readings, they're off the charts. Whatever's out there, it's big, and it's not natural." Admiral Voss stared out the viewport, his jaw tightening. He didn't need to say it aloud. The crew could feel it too. This mission wouldn't be simple. Something vast and potentially dangerous awaited them. But turning back wasn't an option. Humanity had survived Earth's trials by facing challenges head-on, and they would do the same here. The journey to the source of the distress signal was tense, but uneventful. As the fleet approached its destination, the view outside the Invincible Tide's viewport grew increasingly grim. The once bright stars seemed dimmer here, obscured by a thick haze of cosmic dust. At the center of it all loomed a dying planet, its surface marred by scars that told stories of devastation. Its atmosphere churned with ash and smoke, glowing faintly red under the weak light of a dying sun. Captain Taryn Drake stood beside Admiral Cal Voss on the bridge, her sharp eyes scanning the readings from the ship's sensors. "This place looks like hell," she muttered, shaking her head. Voss didn't respond immediately. He studied the planet intently, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. It wasn't always like this. Look at those ruins. He pointed to the holographic display showing scans of the surface. Scattered across the barren landscape were remnants of structures, tall spires, domes, and what appeared to be intricate networks of roads. This world had been home to an advanced civilization, one now reduced to rubble. A landing party was quickly assembled. Led by Captain Drake, the team included Lieutenant Rhea Cade, Dr. Lyra Solon, and a squad of heavily armed Marines. Their mission was simple: investigate the source of the signal and determine if anyone, or anything, was still alive down there. As their shuttle descended through the toxic atmosphere, the air grew heavier, charged with static electricity. When they touched down, the scene before them was surreal. Strange crystalline towers jutted out of the ground, pulsating faintly with an inner glow. These crystals emitted low-frequency vibrations that resonated in the chests of the humans, almost as if they were alive. "This must be where the signal is coming from," said Dr. Solon, adjusting her scanner. She knelt beside one of the crystals, running her fingers lightly over its smooth surface. "It's fascinating. I've never seen anything like this." Before anyone could respond, movement caught their attention. From behind a crumbling structure emerged several insectoid creatures, their bodies covered in shimmering exoskeletons that reflected the dim light. They moved cautiously, their large, multifaceted eyes fixed on the humans. Patterns of glowing colors shifted across their shells, flickering rhythmically. "They're trying to communicate," whispered Lieutenant Cade, her voice filled with awe. She activated her translator device, which began analyzing the patterns of light. After a few moments, Dr. Solon gasped. "They're saying, 'Save us,' and 'they are coming.'" Captain Drake stepped forward, raising her hand slowly to show they meant no harm. "Who's coming?" she asked aloud, though she knew the aliens wouldn't understand her words directly. The insectoids, later identified as the Vailith, responded urgently, their bioluminescent patterns flashing faster. Through further translation efforts, the humans pieced together fragments of their story. The Vailith had once thrived on this planet, building great cities and mastering advanced technologies. But then came the Xorthan, a parasitic hive mind that consumed everything in its path. The Vailith had fought valiantly, but were losing. Now they begged for help evacuating their people before the Xorthan returned. Admiral Voss listened to the report back aboard the Invincible Tide. His face hardened as he processed the information. Helping the Vailith would be risky, especially with the Xorthan lurking nearby. But abandoning them felt wrong. Humanity had faced extinction-level threats before. Perhaps they could make a difference here. "Prepare the fleet for rescue operations," he ordered. "We'll do what we can." But even as plans were made, ominous energy readings continued to spike. Somewhere out there, the Xorthan were watching and waiting. The rescue operation began with cautious optimism. The human fleet worked tirelessly to coordinate efforts with the Vailith, using their glowing patterns and newly translated signals to establish basic communication. Some of the insectoid aliens expressed gratitude, their bioluminescent displays shifting into calming hues of blue and green. But not all were so welcoming. A faction of Vailith remained wary, their colors flashing aggressively in shades of red and orange. They didn't trust these strange newcomers from the stars. Captain Taryn Drake noticed the tension during one of her visits to the surface. She stood near a group of Marines guarding a makeshift evacuation site, watching as Vailith workers loaded survivors onto shuttles bound for the safety of the human ships. Her sharp eyes caught movement at the edge of the camp. A cluster of Vailith whispering urgently among themselves. Their glowing patterns flickered erratically, betraying unease. "Something's off," she muttered to Lieutenant Rhea Cade, who was examining samples of the crystalline structures nearby. "They're not all on board with this." Cade glanced up, brushing dust off her gloves. "Can you blame them? We just showed up out of nowhere. For all they know, we could be worse than the Xorthan." Drake frowned but said nothing. She trusted her instincts, and they told her trouble was brewing. Still, There wasn't much time to dwell on it. Every second counted if they hoped to save even a fraction of the Violet population before the Xorthan returned. Back aboard the Invincible Tide, Admiral Cal Voss convened an emergency meeting with his senior officers. Reports had come in about skirmishes breaking out between different factions of Violet. While some cooperated fully, others resisted evacuation attempts, claiming sacred relics or vital technology needed to be retrieved first. Tempers flared on both sides, and tensions threatened to derail the entire mission. "We can't afford delays," Voss said firmly, pacing the briefing room. "If the Xorthan arrive while we're still stuck down there." He was interrupted by a sudden alarm blaring through the ship. Red lights flashed across the bridge as sensors detected incoming objects moving at incredible speed. "They're here," shouted one of the crew members, panic creeping into their voice. On the surface, chaos erupted almost instantly. Biomechanical drones descended from the sky, their sleek forms glinting menacingly in the dim light. Each drone was a grotesque fusion of organic tissue and metal, its body writhing with tendrils that lashed out like whips. The humans scrambled to defend themselves, firing pulse rifles and deploying portable shields. The Valeth fought alongside them, using crude weapons powered by harmonic resonance. But it wasn't enough. One Marine went down screaming as a tendril pierced his armor, injecting him with something that made his skin bubble and warp unnaturally. Another drone targeted a group of fleeing Valeth civilians, cutting them down without hesitation. Panic spread as more drones poured in, overwhelming the defenders. Captain Drake barked orders, rallying her team. "Fall back to the shuttles. Protect the civilians." But retreat wasn't easy. The drones seemed relentless, adapting to every tactic thrown at them. Just when it seemed hopeless, the attack abruptly ceased. The remaining drones hovered for a moment, then retreated into the sky, leaving behind eerie silence. Breathing heavily, Captain Drake surveyed the damage. Bodies lay scattered across the ground, human and Valeth alike. Smoke curled upward from destroyed equipment, and the air smelled acrid. Admiral Voss contacted her via comms. "Report, Captain." "It was a hit and run," Drake replied grimly. "They're testing us, seeing what we're capable of." Voss clenched his jaw. "Then we better learn fast. Next time, they won't hold back." As the survivors regrouped, one thing became clear. Humanity had entered a fight far bigger than themselves, and failure wasn't an option. The aftermath of the Xorthan attack left the human fleet shaken but determined. Admiral Cal Voss knew they couldn't afford another surprise like that. To fight an enemy, they needed to understand it, and fast. With the evacuation efforts temporarily halted due to the chaos, he ordered a deep dive into the Valeth archives. If anyone had answers about the Xorthan, it would be the insectoid aliens themselves. Dr. Lyra Solon and Lieutenant Rhea Cade were tasked with leading the investigation. Armed with portable scanners and translation devices, they ventured deeper into the ruins of the Valeth capital city. The air was thick with ash, and the ground crunched underfoot as they navigated through toppled spires and shattered crystalline structures. Despite the destruction, fragments of ancient technology still hummed faintly, their power sources somehow intact after centuries. "This place feels haunted," Cade muttered, brushing aside a layer of dust from what appeared to be a control panel embedded in a wall. She activated her scanner, which began decoding the alien script etched onto its surface. Solon nodded grimly. "It's not just haunted, it's cursed. Look at this." She pointed to a series of holographic projections flickering to life above the console. Images of sleek spacecraft, towering cities, and thriving ecosystems gave way to scenes of devastation. Swarms of biomechanical creatures consuming everything in their path, leaving only ruin behind. "They created them," Solon whispered, her voice trembling. "The Valeth made the Xorthan." Cade froze, staring at the holograms. "What do you mean? They built those monsters?" "Not intentionally," Solon explained, piecing together the fragmented data. "Centuries ago, The Valeth sought immortality. They experimented with synthetic biology, trying to merge organic matter with machines. At first it worked. They extended lifespans, cured diseases, even enhanced their abilities. But something went wrong. Their creations evolved beyond their control, becoming parasitic entities that consumed their creators' bodies and minds. The implications hit Cade like a punch to the gut. So the Xorthen aren't just invaders. They're the Valeth's own mistake come back to haunt them. As they delved further, the truth became clearer and more horrifying. The Xorthen weren't content with destroying the Valeth alone. Once they exhausted a planet's resources, they moved on to new worlds, spreading their hive mind across the galaxy. The Valeth had tried to contain the threat, but every attempt failed. Now, humanity had stepped into the crossfire. When Solon and Cade returned to the Invincible Tide, they presented their findings to Admiral Voss and his senior officers. The briefing room fell silent as the holographic projections played out the Valeth's tragic history. "This changes everything," Captain Taryn Drake said finally, breaking the silence. "If we help the Valeth, we're risking unleashing the Xorthen on other species, including ours." Voss leaned forward, his expression grave. "But if we don't help, we abandon innocent lives and let the Xorthen grow stronger unchecked. We can't make this decision lightly." Lieutenant Cade spoke up, her tone firm. "We need to focus on understanding their weaknesses. If the Valeth created them, there must be a flaw in their design, something we can exploit." Admiral Voss nodded slowly. "Agreed. Start analyzing everything we've gathered so far. Work with the Valeth scientists. They might know things they haven't told us yet." As the team dispersed to carry out his orders, Voss remained seated, staring at the holograms. Humanity had faced extinction-level threats before, but this was different. The Xorthen weren't driven by hunger or territorial instinct. They were relentless, adaptive, and seemingly unstoppable. Defeating them wouldn't just require strength. It would demand ingenuity, sacrifice, and perhaps a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about creation and responsibility. For now, the humans had bought themselves some time. But as Voss stared into the void outside the viewport, he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The weight of the discovery hung heavily over the human fleet. Knowing that the Xorthen were born from the Valeth's own hubris made trust between the two species even more fragile. Admiral Cal Voss understood that cooperation was their only chance for survival, but forging a true alliance wouldn't be easy. The Valeth were divided, some desperate for help, others suspicious of humanity's intentions. To bridge the gap, Voss called for a meeting with the Valeth leaders aboard the Invincible Tide. It was a bold move, inviting them into the heart of the human flagship, but he hoped it would demonstrate goodwill. The Valeth delegation arrived cautiously, their bioluminescent patterns flickering nervously as they stepped onto the sleek metallic floors of the conference room. Their leader, a towering insectoid named Zirkal, spoke through Dr. Lyra Solon's translation device. "We cannot leave without retrieving our relics," Zirkal insisted, his glowing patterns shifting to deep reds and purples. "They hold the essence of our people, their memories, their history." Captain Taryn Drake frowned. "Your relics won't matter if you're all dead. The Xorthen are coming back, and we don't have time for distractions." Zirkal's colors flared angrily. "You do not understand. Without those relics, we lose ourselves entirely. We become nothing." The tension in the room thickened. Admiral Voss raised a hand, silencing both sides before tempers escalated further. "We'll find a way to retrieve your relics," he said firmly, his voice calm but authoritative. "But first, we need your full cooperation. Share everything you know about the Xorthen, their weaknesses, their tactics. Together, we stand a better chance." Reluctantly, Zirkal agreed. Over the next few hours, the Valeth shared critical intel about the Xorthen's biology and behavior. They revealed that the hive mind relied on a central neural network to coordinate its drones, a potential vulnerability. Disrupting this network could cripple their ability to function as a unified force. Meanwhile, Captain Drake led covert missions to sabotage key Xorthan installations on the planet's surface. These raids were risky, requiring small teams to infiltrate enemy territory under cover of darkness. During one such mission, Drake and her squad discovered a massive underground facility teeming with biomechanical horrors. Rows upon rows of dormant drones lined the walls, waiting to be activated. At the center of the facility was a pulsating core, a nexus of energy that seemed to control the entire operation. "This must be part of their neural network," whispered Lieutenant Rhea Cade, scanning the core with her equipment. "If we can disable it." Drake nodded grimly. "Do it, but make it quick. We're not staying long." Cade planted explosive charges around the core while the rest of the team kept watch. Just as they finished, alarms blared throughout the facility. Drones began awakening, their mechanical limbs twitching as they turned toward the intruders. "Fall back," Drake shouted, firing her pulse rifle to hold off the advancing swarm. The team sprinted toward their extraction point, explosions rocking the facility behind them as the charges detonated. The core collapsed in a shower of sparks and molten metal, temporarily crippling the Xorthan's operations in the area. Back aboard the fleet, the data collected during these missions proved invaluable. Combined with insights from the Vailith, the humans developed countermeasures, including EMP weapons designed to disrupt the Xorthan's neural pathways. Morale improved slightly as the crew saw tangible progress, but everyone knew the real battle was yet to come. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge, watching the stars outside the viewport. For now, they had struck a blow against the Xorthan and secured a tentative alliance with the Vailith. But the cost of failure remained unthinkable. As he turned to issue new orders, his resolve hardened. Humanity, and the galaxy, depended on what happened next. The fragile alliance between humanity and the Vailith began to crack under the pressure of mounting casualties and dwindling time. While the evacuation efforts continued, tensions simmered just below the surface. The humans worked tirelessly to protect the Vailith civilians, but not all Vailith appreciated their efforts. Some viewed the humans as outsiders who couldn't possibly understand their plight, while others whispered that they might abandon the Vailith once it became too dangerous. Admiral Cal Voss tried to maintain order, but even he felt the strain. He paced the bridge of the invincible tide, his sharp eyes scanning reports from the surface. One update caught his attention. A group of Vailith had sabotaged one of the fleet's smaller cruisers, claiming they wouldn't leave without retrieving sacred relics hidden deep within their capital city. The sabotage caused minor damage, but enough to delay critical repairs needed for future battles. Captain Terran crew members urged him to take decisive action. "We can't let this slide, sir," Captain Drake said firmly, her arms crossed. "If we don't punish them, it'll send the wrong message." Voss hesitated. Harsh discipline could shatter what little trust remained between the two species, but leniency might embolden further acts of defiance. After a long pause, he made his decision. "No punishment," he said finally. "But make it clear, any further sabotage will result in immediate expulsion from our ships. We're here to help, not fight among ourselves." Drake nodded reluctantly, though her expression betrayed her frustration. She relayed the message to the Vailith leaders, who accepted it with cautious gratitude. However, the incident left a bitter taste in everyone's mouths. Trust was eroding faster than anyone wanted to admit. Meanwhile, intelligence reports painted an increasingly dire picture. Scans revealed that the Xorthan were amassing a massive invasion fleet nearby. Thousands of biomechanical warships loomed on the edge of sensor range, their ominous silhouettes glowing faintly against the void. Time was running out. Admiral Voss gathered his senior officers for an emergency strategy meeting. "We need to buy ourselves more time," he said, pointing to a holographic map of the system. "Here's the plan. We'll use decoy signals to lure the Xorthan into a trap. It won't stop them completely, but it should give us enough breathing room to complete the evacuation and fortify our defenses." Lieutenant Rhea Cade raised a skeptical eyebrow. "And if they see through the ruse?" "Then we fight like hell," Voss replied grimly. Prepare the fleet for combat readiness. Every ship needs to be armed and ready to engage at a moment's notice. As preparations unfolded, Captain Drake led a team back to the surface to plant additional EMP devices around key locations. These weapons would serve as a first line of defense when the Xorthan inevitably attacked again. But as she worked alongside the Vailith engineers, she couldn't shake the feeling that betrayal lingered in the air. Some Vailith avoided eye contact, their bioluminescent patterns flickering nervously. Her suspicions proved correct during one fateful night. A faction of Vailith secretly transmitted coordinates of the human fleet to the Xorthan, hoping to save themselves by sacrificing their supposed allies. When the transmission was intercepted by human sensors, Admiral Voss faced another moral dilemma. "We can't ignore this," Drake argued heatedly. "They betrayed us." Voss sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "No, we handle it diplomatically. Confront Zerikal and demand answers. But don't escalate unless absolutely necessary." When confronted, Zerikal admitted the betrayal, his colors shifting to defensive shades of orange and yellow. "We feared you would leave us behind," he explained bitterly. "What choice did we have?" Voss stared at him coldly. "Your fear almost doomed us all. If we survive this, remember who stood by you and who didn't." The confrontation ended without violence, but the damage was done. Trust was shattered, and paranoia spread throughout the fleet. As the countdown to the Xorthan's arrival ticked closer, humanity realized they were fighting not only an alien enemy, but also the fragility of alliances forged in desperation. The plan was risky, but it had to work. Admiral Cal Voss stood on the bridge of the Invincible Tide, watching as his fleet executed the decoy operation with precision. False signals were broadcasted into space, mimicking the energy signatures of vulnerable human ships stranded near the dying planet's moon. If everything went according to plan, the Xorthan would take the bait and divert their massive invasion fleet toward the trap. Captain Terran Drake oversaw the deployment of unmanned drones disguised as damaged cruisers. These drones emitted faint distress calls, designed to appear like easy targets for the biomechanical swarm. "Let's hope they're as greedy as they are relentless," she muttered under her breath, her eyes glued to the tactical display. For a while, it seemed to be working. Sensor readings showed the Xorthan fleet altering course, their warships converging on the decoys. Cheers erupted among the crew aboard the Invincible Tide. But just as relief began to settle in, Lieutenant Rhea Cade noticed something alarming. "Admiral," she called out urgently, pointing to her console. "Their numbers. They're far greater than we anticipated. This isn't just a scouting party, it's their entire armada." Voss clenched his jaw, his gaze fixed on the holographic map, now swarming with red markers representing the enemy ships, thousands of them. His earlier confidence wavered, replaced by cold dread. How could they mobilize so many? He asked aloud, though no one had an answer. Before long, the first wave of Xorthan drones descended upon the decoys, tearing through the unmanned vessels with horrifying efficiency. But instead of retreating after destroying the false targets, the main fleet continued advancing, straight toward the human ships hiding behind the planet's shadow. "They saw through the ruse," Captain Drake said grimly, gripping the railing of the command deck. "They're coming for us." Panic rippled through the fleet, but Admiral Voss quickly regained control. "All hands, prepare for engagement. Activate defensive grids and deploy EMP weapons. We hold them off as long as we can." As the battle erupted, chaos reigned. The Xorthan warships unleashed devastating barrages of energy beams and kinetic projectiles, overwhelming the human fleet's shields. Explosions lit up the void as smaller ships were obliterated in seconds. Marines scrambled to man turrets, firing pulse cannons at incoming drones that swarmed like locusts. Amidst the carnage, Captain Drake made a decision that would haunt her forever. Spotting a gap in the Xorthan formation, she volunteered to lead a suicide mission aboard a retrofitted freighter loaded with explosives. Her goal: infiltrate the heart of the Xorthan mothership and detonate the payload, crippling their command structure. On not asking permission, she told Voss when he protested. "If I don't do this, we lose everything." Reluctantly, Voss gave the order to let her go. As Drake piloted the freighter toward the monstrous high ship, her voice crackled over the comms one last time. "For Earth. For all of us." The explosion was blinding, engulfing the mothership in a fiery inferno. The Xorthan fleet faltered momentarily, giving the humans precious time to regroup. But victory came at a cost. When the smoke cleared, Captain Taryn Drake was gone, her sacrifice etched into the memories of every surviving crew member. Back on the invincible tide, Admiral Voss bowed his head in silence. They had bought themselves a reprieve, but the war was far from over. The loss of Captain Taryn Drake weighed heavily on the crew of the invincible tide. Her sacrifice had given them a temporary edge, but the cost was devastating. Morale plummeted as the humans regrouped, their ships battered and resources dwindling. Admiral Cal Voss knew they couldn't rely on heroics alone to survive. If humanity, and the Vailith, were to stand any chance against the Xorthan, they needed something more than brute force. They needed ingenuity. In the aftermath of the battle, Lieutenant Rhea Cade found herself at the center of this desperate push for innovation. She gathered a team of scientists, engineers, and even a few cooperative Vailith experts in the ship's research lab. The air buzzed with urgency as they pored over data collected from previous encounters with the Xorthan. "We've seen how adaptable they are," Cade said, addressing the group. "But every organism has vulnerabilities. We just need to find theirs." One of the Vailith scientists, an elder named Kreves, offered a critical insight. The Xorthan were once biological creations, he explained through Dr. Lyra Solin's translation device. Though they have evolved beyond our control, traces of their original biology remain. Target those weaknesses. Inspired by Earth's own deadly ecosystems, Cade proposed a radical idea: bioengineered organisms designed specifically to attack the Xorthan's organic components. Drawing inspiration from Earth's parasitic wasps and flesh-eating bacteria, she envisioned microscopic agents, dubbed nemesis spores, that could infiltrate the biomechanical drones and corrupt their neural pathways. The concept was risky, bordering on reckless. Introducing such organisms into space could have unforeseen consequences, potentially creating new threats if not contained properly. But time was running out, and the alternative was annihilation. With Admiral Voss's reluctant approval, the project moved forward. While Cade worked on the spores, another breakthrough came from studying ancient Vailith technology. Hidden within the ruins of their capital city were weapons powered by harmonic resonance, a forgotten science that used sound waves to disrupt molecular structures. These weapons, though primitive compared to modern armaments, proved devastatingly effective against the Xorthan's biomechanical bodies. When activated, the resonant frequencies caused the drone's metallic shells to vibrate violently, tearing them apart from within. Admiral Voss ordered immediate integration of these tools into the fleet's arsenal. Marines trained tirelessly to wield the harmonic weapons alongside conventional firearms, while engineers retrofitted ships with launchers capable of dispersing the nemesis spores. Every available resource was poured into preparing for the next inevitable clash. As the preparations neared completion, tensions aboard the fleet reached a breaking point. Supplies were low, repairs were slow, and exhaustion gnawed at everyone. Even Admiral Voss felt the strain, his usually steady demeanor fraying under the weight of leadership. Yet, amidst the despair, small sparks of hope flickered. Stories of Captain Drake's bravery spread throughout the fleet, inspiring determination among the crew. They began referring to her as the Torch, a symbol of resilience and sacrifice. Finally, the moment arrived. Sensor readings indicated the Xorthan fleet was regrouping, likely planning another assault. This time, however, humanity wouldn't face them unprepared. Armed with their new innovations and fortified defenses, the fleet braced for impact. Standing on the bridge, Admiral Voss stared out at the stars, his mind racing. He thought of Earth, the harsh world that had forged humanity into survivors. No matter how dire the odds, Humans had always found a way to adapt, to fight back. As alarms blared and red lights flashed, signaling the approach of the enemy, Voss gave the order, engage. The stage was set for what would either be humanity's greatest triumph or its final stand. The battle began with a deafening roar as the Xorthan fleet surged forward, their biomechanical warships blotting out the stars. The humans met them head-on, unleashing everything they had prepared. The first wave of drones was greeted by a storm of EMP blasts and harmonic resonance weapons, tearing through their ranks like wildfire. For the first time, the Xorthan hesitated, their movements faltering as the Nemesis spores infiltrated their systems, corrupting their neural pathways. Admiral Cal Voss watched from the bridge of the invincible tide, his jaw clenched tightly as tactical displays lit up with chaotic flashes of red and green. "It's working," he muttered under his breath, though his relief was short-lived. Despite the initial success, the sheer size of the Xorthan fleet meant that even heavy losses barely dented their numbers. More ships poured in, relentless and unyielding. Lieutenant Rhea Kay coordinated the deployment of the spores from her station, her hands trembling slightly as she monitored their spread. "They're adapting faster than we expected," she reported grimly. "Some drones are already resisting the spores' effects." Captain Mira Hale, who had taken over command after Captain Drake's sacrifice, barked orders across the comms. "Focus fire on the larger ships. We can't let them overwhelm us." Marines aboard damaged cruisers fought valiantly to hold off boarding parties of biomechanical horrors, their pulse rifles blazing as harmonic resonance grenades detonated in bursts of shimmering energy. Amidst the chaos, Admiral Voss realized the hard truth: holding the line wasn't enough. Even with their new weapons, the human fleet couldn't sustain this fight indefinitely. A desperate plan formed in his mind, one that would require unimaginable sacrifice. Summoning Zirkal, the Vailith leader, to the bridge, Voss laid out his proposal. "We need to collapse the planet's core," he said bluntly. "Triggering a supernova-like explosion will wipe out the Xorthan fleet, but it means sacrificing anyone still on the surface." Zirkal's bioluminescent patterns flared wildly, shifting between anger and sorrow. "You ask us to condemn our people to extinction." Voss met his gaze without flinching. "I'm asking you to save what remains of your species, and ours. If we don't act now, the Xorthan will spread further, consuming everything in their path. This is the only way." After a tense silence, Zirkal bowed his head, his colors dimming to somber blues. "Very well, we will stay behind." News of the decision spread quickly among the Vailith survivors. Some accepted their fate stoically, while others raged against it. But ultimately, they chose to remain on their dying world, determined to ensure that their legacy wouldn't be one of destruction but of redemption. As the last shuttles departed the surface, carrying the final remnants of the Vailith people to safety aboard the human fleet, Admiral Voss gave the order. "Initiate the sequence." Deep within the planet's crust, specially designed charges planted by human engineers detonated in precise synchronization. The ground quaked violently as fissures tore open, releasing torrents of molten energy. Above the surface, the skies ignited in a brilliant cascade of light, growing brighter and hotter with each passing second. On board the invincible tide, the crew watched in stunned silence as the planet imploded in a cataclysmic explosion. The shockwave engulfed the Xorthan fleet, obliterating thousands of ships in an instant. Cheers erupted briefly, but they were muted by the weight of what had been lost. As the dust settled and the enemy forces retreated into disarray, Admiral Voss turned away from the viewport. Victory had come at a terrible cost. Humanity had survived, but the scars of this battle would linger forever. The silence that followed the planet's destruction was deafening. The invincible tide drifted through the void, its crew exhausted but alive. Admiral Cal Voss stood on the bridge, staring at the glowing remnants of the once dying world, now reduced to a swirling nebula of ash and energy. It was a hauntingly beautiful sight, yet it carried the weight of countless sacrifices, human and Vailith alike. Dr. Lyra Solon approached him quietly, her face pale with fatigue. "We did what we had to do," she said softly, though her voice trembled. "But I can't stop thinking about them, the ones who stayed behind." Voss nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "They chose to fight for something bigger than themselves. Their bravery will never be forgotten." The surviving Valith aboard the fleet were somber, their bioluminescent patterns flickering faintly in mourning. Though they had lost their homeworld, they carried fragments of their culture. The sacred relics retrieved during the evacuation, and a renewed determination to rebuild. Zerakal addressed his people over the comms, his colors shifting to steady greens and blues. "Our ancestors taught us resilience," he said. "Though our world is gone, we are still here. And as long as we endure, so does our legacy." Admiral Voss called for a final meeting with his senior officers to assess the aftermath. The human fleet had suffered heavy losses, ships destroyed, lives lost, and resources depleted. Yet, against all odds, they had triumphed. The Xorthan fleet had been decimated, its hive mind fractured. For now, the immediate threat was neutralized, but no one believed this victory would last forever. "We've bought ourselves time," Captain Mira Hale said firmly, standing beside Voss. "But the Xorthan aren't gone. They'll regroup, adapt, and come back stronger." Lieutenant Rhea Cade added grimly, "And next time, they'll know exactly what we're capable of." Voss turned to face his team, his eyes filled with resolve. "Then we prepare. We learn from this battle, and make sure we're ready when they return. Humanity has always thrived because of its ability to adapt, and today we proved that again." As the fleet limped toward human space, carrying the last remnants of the Valith civilization, hope began to flicker anew. The humans and Valith worked together to repair damaged ships, share knowledge, and forge plans for the future. Bonds formed between the two species, born out of shared grief and mutual respect. Stories of Captain Taryn Drake's sacrifice inspired both humans and Valith alike, reminding them of the courage required to stand against overwhelming odds. In the weeks that followed, Admiral Voss reflected on the lessons learned. The Valith's hubris had unleashed the Xorthan, but humanity's own history held similar warnings. Earth itself had nearly been destroyed by unchecked ambition and ecological devastation before its people rose to survive. Now, tasked with safeguarding the galaxy, Voss vowed to ensure humanity wouldn't repeat those mistakes. When the fleet finally reached the safety of human-controlled space, they were greeted as heroes. News of their victory spread quickly, igniting pride and unity among Earth's scattered colonies. But Voss knew the war wasn't over. It might never truly end. Somewhere in the vastness of space, another SOS could emerge, signaling new dangers and challenges. As the stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, Admiral Voss made a silent promise. Humanity had faced extinction-level threats before, and each time they had risen stronger. This time would be no different. Together, with allies old and new, they would face whatever came next. For now, there was peace, and in that fragile moment, it was enough.